Hello, everybody. Today we're going to go over the research plan requirements. You should be stepping from your position paper to the research plan at this point. Let me just check my volume here. Okay. So anyway, you are moving from position paper to research plan, which means you're taking your position and finding some research to support it. The database you are going to use is Opposing Viewpoints in Context. That's a really important aspect of this assignment, is that all of your sources need to come from that database or from books in the library. And like I've promoted and pushed you before, the librarians are available and willing to help you with this research project. Please don't wait till the last minute to meet with one of them. I can also tell you that students who have used librarians definitely save a lot of time and frustration on their own research process. So please take advantage of that resource for yourself. Okay, so basically today I'm going to review the assignment expectations. So open up your Blackboard if you have it with you. And on the left-hand side, we're going to go to assignments and exams. And we're going to click on research plan, which is due on Sunday, November 15th. If you take a look at the description, it says read the assignment description carefully. Basically, if you meet all of the requirements, you will do well. The assignment is very time consuming and often ends up being 10 to 15 pages long. It is not required to be 10 to 15 pages long, but I can guarantee you if it is not at least 10, then you're probably not doing the assignment correctly. There are 2 student samples in the samples folder, which I will show you in a second. And the assignment description is attached here. There's a little document that says research plan. We're going to click on that and download it. And then we're going to look at the rubric. So click on the research plan document and download it. And it gives you a lot of different directions. So one of the main issues that students have had with this assignment is just simply not reading all of the directions and following them. If you do read all of the directions and follow them, like I said, you will easily do well on this assignment. The research plan outlines your research for your final paper. The position paper was step 1, like I've told you before, where you're organizing and sort of creating your own voice and narrowing down your topic. The research plan is step 2, and the purpose is to organize your research, assess credibility and value of sources, analyze the opposition, and connect your own ideas to someone else's. So you're not only researching sources to support your ideas, you're also researching different viewpoints and perspectives, because part of your research paper is addressing the opposition. So you definitely want to use an opposition source, at least one. The final paper that you're going to do must have 5 to 7 total sources, no more than 7. The research plan only has to have 5, because I'm assuming that during this time period, you're building your research and things like that. So I'm only requiring 5 sources for the research plan, even though the paper allows 5 to 7. Also, I want to mention that when you're doing your research, when you're assessing credibility and value of sources, you need to find sources that are directly related to your narrowed topic. So you don't just want to pick the first things that come up on your search in the databases. You want to scroll through and look at abstracts and see if particular sources directly correlate to your thesis statement, to your tentative thesis statement. The reason I say tentative thesis statement is because you may have a thesis statement that you'd like to pursue. And tentative means that you're willing to change it. Based on your research, you might have to change your thesis based on what you find. For example, you might find something that totally goes against what your thesis statement is saying and makes sense to you, so you might need to change your thesis because of that. Or maybe you made an assumption in your thesis statement that you find debunked in a research article. So, your thesis statement is flexible. The research document has to be a Word document. It may not be submitted in Pages form or in the text box in the submission. It has to be a Word document. So if you don't have Microsoft Word on your computer, you'll have to use the campus computers or another computer. You have to type it. It's unacceptable to be handwritten. It has to be double spaced, 12-point Times New Roman font. You can choose APA or MLA format of your entries. It's your choice, but whichever choice you do, I am going to hold you to that. So you can't have one source that's APA sorted and APA cited and one that's MLA cited. They both have to be, or all of them have to be either APA or MLA. You can easily find the format on how to do the APA or MLA on the databases. That's another reason I'm making you use the Morrisville resources that you have, because they do help you with citations, and then you just double check them with your Little Seagull handbook. I have kind of outlined how to set up the research plan, and if you're a more visual person, that's where the samples will come in handy, because this is a lot of directions. So the first thing you're going to do is put your full source citation hanging indented before you answer the questions. You have to have at least 5 sources labeled by type. So when you put the sources in, you're going to label them by type. You're going to say this is an opposition source, this is a podcast, this is a video, whatever type of source you have. You want to label it if it's opposing your viewpoint or supporting it. The 2 types of sources I am requiring are, one type has to be in opposition, one type has to be multimedia, because I'd like you to experience researching beyond print. So you can choose a podcast, a video, a documentary, a movie, a mini series, whatever multimedia you want to use besides print. So those are the only two requirements for types of sources. And of course, you know that you can't use things like Wikipedia or blogs or anything like that. Now, here's where the time-consuming part comes in. You have to answer all of these questions, which should be easy to answer if you read your source thoroughly, and you have to answer in complete sentences. So, for example, let's scroll down to number 14. What are new ideas in the article that I did not know before? First of all, I've had students put none or no new ideas. The first problem with that is that it's not a complete sentence. The second problem with that is if you didn't learn anything new, then you probably shouldn't use it in your research paper. For number 13, what other valuable, interesting research is referenced and how can I access it? That's where you're going to look at the works cited pages of the sources you choose. So let's say you find an article that you really love. Look at that article's citations or works cited and see if there's anything they use that you would also like to access, and see if you can find it on the database. So basically the assignment is to answer these 14 questions for each of your 5 sources in complete sentences. And part of it is that you need an opposition source and you need a multimedia source. And those 2 are 2 of the 5 that you need for the research plan. So let's take a look at the rubric. How is this going to be graded? If you click on the bold black assignment in Blackboard that says research plan due Sunday, November 15th, the view rubric button pops up. Click on the button and let's look at the rubric. There are only 4 aspects of this assignment that are graded. Source evaluation, basically you've answered all of the questions thoroughly and it's clear that you've understood and evaluated the value of the source. The credibility of sources, this means that you've done Morrisville databases or books, and that if you did outside research, you let me know. You could also do an interview if you would like. Source types, basically this grade is going to be super easy if you have found at least 1 opposition source, 1 multimedia source, and 3 other types of sources that are clearly labeled with what type of source they are and if they support or oppose your viewpoint. And then the organization is super important because this is a very large document that I have to grade for 47 students. So you have to organize it the way that I wrote it out on the assignment description. And also you can look at the student samples. All right, so let's take a look at the student samples. If you go to course materials and click on the samples folder, I moved the 2 research plan student samples to the top of the page. And the very first one is going to be super handy because it is the research plan for Talha's position paper that I had lectured you about before. So this is kind of to show you how Talha went from his position paper to his research plan. A really good idea is that you should put your research questions and your tentative thesis at the very top of your research plan. The reason for that is to keep you focused and to keep reminding you of what's important to find in your sources, right? So if you look at Talha's paper, he has the proper MLA header on the top right-hand side. He has the proper MLA heading on the left-hand side. He has the title, research plan, and then he has his general summary, his research questions, and his tentative thesis. And you can see how his research questions and tentative thesis have changed from his position paper based on doing some research. So if you look at his first source by Tim Craig, you can see that number one, he chose MLA formatting. He boldly, he put his type of source in bold, support scholarly journal. So I know when I'm looking at this that the Tim Craig article supports all his ideas, excuse me, and it's also scholarly. Okay, an easy way to do this assignment is just cut and paste the questions on the assignment description, cut and paste those 5 times in a document, and then you know you have to have the 5 sources for those. So if you scroll down, you'll see that Talha's paper ended up being 14 pages long. His spacing was incorrect, but that wasn't a huge deal. But you can see how he analyzes the appeals and the logos. And if you go all the way down to question number 13, you'll see that he did look at another article that was referenced in the original article that he's doing this particular entry on. He answered the new ideas question very well. And then you'll see the next source, Meet Pakistan's First Transgender News article, and that is a support scholarly journal. He has a little spelling error there. Also, his title, Meet Pakistan's First Transgender News Anchor, all of those words should be capitalized. But other than that, opposing viewpoints and context should also be italicized. So those are some minimal errors. Talha did earn an A on this assignment, but he did get points off for the spelling mistakes and some of the formatting errors. All right, so then you can look at how he answered those questions. And if you scroll down to page 6, his next article by Max Barrick is a scholarly article that supports his claim. If you scroll down again, you'll see that Pamela Constable has an opposition to Talha's argument, and it would be really interesting for you to read through how this is in opposition to his argument. And then if you keep going, you'll see that he watched a film, and that was his multimedia source, and it was also a support source. So you see that he has labeled them not only opposing or support, he's also labeled them with if it's a multimedia or not. Okay, so there's Talha's, and I did want to show you his because it was like, you can see the progression from position paper to research plan, but like I said, there are a few formatting errors, but other than that, the content of Talha's research plan is really great. Okay, let's look at the next sample. Let's go back in the samples folder and click on the second research plan student sample. And this particular student was a football player at SUNY Morrisville who ended up transferring to Albany. And he originally was interested in football in general. That was his idea for a topic. So we finally narrowed down to he wanted to talk about concussions, but then he wanted to talk about rules. But then we were like, how has football culture affected the fact that we're still having major injuries in NFL and college ball. So his tentative title for his paper was How Football Culture Affects the Rules and Regulations in American Football. And then his research question was, were the rules in American football established based on culture or safety? And what's wrong with the current rules in football currently? And then the tentative thesis was, the rules in American football do not adequately protect against repeated concussions because of the culture of football. Consequently, many American youth football players are affected by retardation of brain development. Therefore, the rules must be regulated immediately to discourage helmet contact to limit the amount of concussions a football player acquires. So then he narrowed down even further to rules that specifically deal with helmets. So his whole paper was about rules, injuries, age group. He specifically focused on concussions in the youth age group and how that affects their adulthood and their brain development. And he specifically looked into helmet rules because we know that in any sport, there are hundreds of rules to follow and regulations. So that's why I encourage Shalom to narrow down to like, what type of rules are we talking about? And his first answer was equipment, but of course there's lots of rules for equipment. So he ended up focusing his thesis on helmets because there are different rules about helmets and wearing them and contact. So if you scroll down, you'll see some similarities between Shalom's research plan and Talha's. You'll note that he's got the research question and the tentative thesis up there at the top to remind me and remind himself what he's doing. And then he has his sources in MLA format. He's labeled it Support Scholarly Journal, the first one. And if you scroll all the way down to the next one on page 5, you'll see the Eric Anderson source is a Support Scholarly Journal. And I think it's important for you when we look at these samples to look at the titles of some of these sources and how great they very specifically relate to Shalom's argument. I mean, this title of the second source, Examining Media Contestation of Masculinity and Head Trauma in the National Football League, in a journal called Men and Masculinities. So that really played into Shalom's idea to tap into football culture and how the football culture of yes, we want to see hits. Yes, we love seeing injuries. And there's lots of masculinity involved with all of these things, and how that culture kind of has led to less safety in football. All right, now if you scroll down further to page 9, his opposition news article is the NFL simply becoming too soft. Obviously, that's going to be had a lot of masculine support for why American football is a men's sport and is for injury and strength and things like that. So, and that was a news article, not a scholarly journal. So he labeled it news article and he labeled it opposition. Then if you scroll down to page 13, he found another opposition source, which he did an interview with an on-campus football coach, and that was his multimedia source. So you can also choose an interview for your multimedia source. And if you scroll down again to page 16, he found another support scholarly journal article, and he found another opposition news article about football culture changing. And you note that this is 21 pages long. And I don't want that to intimidate you. These questions are all questions that you should easily be able to answer. You're not writing the paper yet, you're answering these questions. And answering all of these questions and doing all of this research combined with your position paper is going to come together to have a great research paper. And I can tell you that these two particular students had A's throughout the process because they followed directions, followed the rubric, met with me and contacted me for help, they also met with the librarian, and they were able to really pull off a paper that they felt really great about. Okay, let's go back to Blackboard. And I just want to go over that due date with you again. So the research plan is not due until Sunday, November 15th, which gives you a lot of time to do your research, contact me, contact librarians. If you contact me with a question that I think is more appropriate for a librarian, I can just let you know that, and you can meet with one of them. Remember, on our homepage, let's click and go to that on our Blackboard page. If you go to the homepage, you'll see our announcements. You'll see library chat, library information, and library one search. So the library chat box asks us 24/7. I think you've learned before in the librarian tutorial information that that is answered by SUNY librarians and librarians all over the world 24/7. So you can definitely open the chat box, type in your thesis and say, can you help me develop keywords for my research? Or these are my keywords for research. Can you help me with which databases would yield the best results? Or I found this source, but I'm not sure how to cite it. If you're not sure how to properly MLA or APA cite, first of all, your source should have it if it's from the databases, but you can chat with the librarian and they can help you with that. You can also meet in person with the librarian. I believe they're still doing that. Please note that that may be subject to change. So I would definitely call or email the library to see what their availability is. And then if you scroll all the way down on our homepage, you'll see the library one search box. That one search box searches all of the books in all of the databases. So that can be very overwhelming. For example, if you put in the search box police brutality, you're going to get like 7 million results or something crazy like that. So what you want to do is click on the advanced search link. And what will pop up is options to search lots of different terms. So you could, filter to subject, filter to title, enter your search terms. And if you need help with any of those terms or anything, the librarians are experts. So I really want to promote their help through this project. And they really enjoy helping with this project. They're very familiar with me and what I do with my students in 101. So yeah, they're there for you. And I am too. So please reach out to me if you need help. I'll be chatting with you through YouTube live stream probably next week. I'd like to give you some time to really focus on your research the rest of this week and the weekend, and give you time to ask me any questions if you need to. So I will see you on the internet.